So I'm from York St John University, and Collette Montgomery, who spoke earlier, will be joining us towards the end of the slides. Okay. So as I say, I'm senior lecturer in occupational therapy. I've been there a long time, about 20 years. I hadn't planned to be that long, but 1 year led to the other, and here I am. So plan for today, I'm going to talk about procuring placements abroad. I'm going to talk about some of the practicalities. I'm going to talk, Colette's going to talk about her experience when she went to Australia. We'll talk about some of the challenges, and obviously we'll take some of your questions as well. So I hope that's okay, and we'll keep to time. So procuring placements, it starts usually, we might have a link from either an alumni who's gone from our university and is now working abroad and has contacted us to say, we'd love to have your students. Would you like them to come to us? We've got a very successful alumni project with somebody who now works, she's got her own business in Australia. So we've worked very closely with her. Horizon Therapy, it's called. We've also had links with Leonard Cheshire in the past and gone to some European destinations and some destinations in Africa before as well. We're also just starting, I don't know whether any of you have heard of the Global Leaders Programme. Is there anybody on the call that's heard of that at all? Work the World, has anybody heard of that?
Yes, I have. We had a meeting with him recently. We have a faculty group committee that look at international placements. Because the nursing programme are probably they're the ones who've got active placements. Ours have been scuppered a bit by Brexit because we have the Erasmus with Norway.
Yes.
So we're trying to build ours up again. The chap who started this came to talk to us recently. It's very interesting, and I'm hoping we might be able to use them. So I'd be interested to see what you've got to say about them.
Well, I haven't got a lot yet. We're in the same we're in the same we're at a similar stage to you, I think. My understanding is that the students pay a sum to set them off, but basically they do all the organisation and planning and sorting out accommodation, taking them to and from the airport, finding the educators. So I think they take a lot of the stress of us doing that, I think. They're an organisation that are set up to do that specifically. So yeah, and at the moment the occupational therapy placements they've got on offer are Sri Lanka, Tanzania and the Philippines, but I need to do a lot more work about that, and I'm probably at the similar stage to you then in that at this time.
My nursing colleagues have used them in the past, and the plus side is they've got that structure, as you say. They support the students in country, and the students are staying sort of together with other programs. So that's they're not isolated, they're definitely supported through it. They have to pay for it, obviously, but and
they're with they're with other healthcare professional students, aren't they? So that's the bonus. And my understanding is they have accommodation blocks where they share accommodation together, and they get bed and breakfast and things. So I think it's a potential certainly that we're going to have a look at and see whether it's feasible. The physios that we work with are very keen, and I think they've got more opportunities than the OTs at the moment with that organisation. But no, if anybody's fancying going out to have a look, we'd be very grateful to hear how they're getting on.
Can I say, sorry, I was just going to say the reason there's only 3 countries is those are the only countries they've got links with actually qualified occupational therapists who can supervise. All the other countries, they don't have OTs in place, so you couldn't actually go for the student to be on an assessed placement.
Yeah, okay. In the past, though, we've also gone to Bangladesh, and we haven't sent students there more recently. We were going to do this year, but the student pulled out at the last minute. But we've got very strong links with the Centre for the Rehabilitation of the Paralysed in Dhaka in Bangladesh. We did have students there around about the time of the pandemic, and they had to come home very quickly, which was quite tricky, getting last flights out of the country before everything was shut down. So we do need to build that up again, and that placement's been very successful over a number of years. Have any of you used the placements in Bangladesh at all?
Sorry, it's me again. I've actually worked there.
Have you?
Yeah. I was employed by a charity, Motivation, so we went and set up wheelchair and seating service with children's services there. So I was involved with teaching the therapists, and they were still students. They didn't have a qualified OTs at that point. So physios, OTs, and actually the engineers. Yeah, it's an interesting place. It's quite challenging, but it's very well set up. It's very well structured. They're very used to having international staff to come and support.
And they've built an accommodation block now, and I think it's much more advanced than it perhaps was a good even 10 years ago. So you know, we're developing all the time. So if somebody's got a good idea, and we've got an OT in situ who's a WFOT trained OT, you know, we can make links and start, you know, seeing whether placements are feasible. In years gone past, we used to go and visit them all. Since Brexit and the advent of, not Brexit, since COVID and the advent of Teams, we're able to do a lot more of that online now. But there's nothing, I think it's quite important to see where the students are going to be working. I would prefer to see where they're working, really, rather than just send them out. But we'll see what the university budgets do for that. I don't know at the moment. Okay, so practicalities then. So from a university perspective, there's an expression of interest from the students. We talk to the students about opportunities for going abroad. They choose to go abroad. We always interview the students who want to go to just check really why they want to go, what's the reasons. They need to be fairly resilient and what the coping strategies are. We want to understand how they're going to manage in untoward situations and what support mechanisms they've got around them, because it's quite tough. Especially, we'd ideally send them in pairs or 2 or 3s, but sometimes students end up going on their own, and what mechanisms have they got? Collette will probably mention about that as she went on her own, and the difficulties that poses. We also talk about prior academic attainment. They don't need to be the students that are the most academic, but they do need to be students who can cope with challenges and who have passed the previous placements, because obviously if somebody's failing the placement, it's very difficult for us to manage that from a distance. We can support, and of course we will over Teams, but it might not always be feasible for me to fly out and sort things out at short notice. So, you know, the students do need to be fairly resilient, have good mechanisms, and you know, are not students that are likely to need a heavy amount of support from the university, which sounds really harsh, but it's the truth, really. So what next then? We do quite a lot of work with the people that are the hosts. We have, obviously it's Teams calls. In years gone by, we would have done a visit. We set up a partnership agreement, and then we train those staff in terms of the support for learning in practice. Just because you know, people from different countries will have done different training programs, and it's very much about what the students are learning and how they're learning, and the expectations of the student on that particular placement. We also have the University Quality Assurance Project. We have to go through a number of hoops at the university just to check that the ethics of the country that we're going to are in keeping with the university's own ethics. We also have to look at the Foreign Office guidance as to whether it's safe to travel to those countries. You know, that changes quite frequently. The university offers insurance. Airfares are usually paid for by the students themselves. It depends whether they get Turing funding. Now, years ago, and some of you have already mentioned, we used to get Erasmus funding for placements that were in Europe. We used to go to Portugal and Malta when we had Erasmus funding. But that has just been re-ramped up, I believe, and there's quite strict criteria about Turing funding. So there are expenses available. Each institution has to apply for Turing funding, and it depends how many institutions apply as to how much they're given. And there's some fairly strict criteria about the widening participation agenda, about students who obviously are from a background who wouldn't normally be able to go abroad on a placement. They funding is encouraged, and students with additional needs is encouraged as well. So I understand we've certainly got more funding this next academic year, is what I'm being told. So I don't know, has any of the other HI higher institutions on the call, have you been given any indication about during funding for next year?
We haven't got any indication for last year, but we have used it quite a bit over the last couple of years.
Yeah, good.
We'll probably come to it later, but we've sent students out, but it's not been a placement that they've been able to count hours for.
Yeah, I know, and that's hard, isn't it? So,
yeah.
Okay, so so shorter periods, do you mean? So they've not been placements?
They are not necessarily placed with an occupational therapist, so
Yeah,
therefore
yeah.
they might be in a hospital setting or a community setting that doesn't have
Yeah.
an occupational therapist.
Yeah, okay. So that's over and above what they would normally do.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the other thing is obviously we need emergency contact numbers in case there's any major incidents. And we also have a meeting with the student and educator very regularly. And I'm usually the contact for the international placement. So I meet with the student and the educator very regularly too. The other thing, and I'm sure Collette will talk about this as well, but support whilst you're on placement, we do have regular check-ins. As a placement lead, I do evening support calls for all the students that are on placements anyway. So each cohort has an evening drop-in, 1 hour a week. But when the students are abroad, obviously the time difference, we need to account for that. But there is the opportunity for them to speak with me if they need to. And they also have a halfway visit online from their academic tutor or myself, depending on which is most convenient, really. Collette, do you want to can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Fiona. Well, I recently came back from Australia. I was there for 10.5 weeks. It was an amazing experience. But it was quite challenging at the same time. I'm obviously a mature student and have travelled extensively and had lived in Australia previously, but I still found some parts of it very challenging. The preparation, I felt I did a lot of preparation. As I said, I knew the country. I've been there several times. But I don't think I was prepared as I thought I was. There's an awful lot of differences between Australian healthcare service than there is in the UK. And that was an area that I found quite challenging. The clinic I worked in was a multidisciplinary team, as well as a multicultural team. We had OTs from all over the world, which was quite wonderful. But that brought challenges as well. The service was a private service funded by the NDIS, which is the disability funding that you can apply for in Australia. And all the children on the paediatric placement had funding through this service. There are lots of cultural differences with the practice there as well, which I also found challenging at times. The team consisted of OTs from India, Pakistan, China, Sri Lanka, European countries. There was only one Australian OT, and then the English owner, Kelly, who had also trained at York St John. There were very different ideas about what an OT is and what an OT is there to do, which I found quite interesting. And they all called the occupational therapist by different names and different terminology, which was also quite a learning curve. The challenges I had with it being private practice was really a personal challenge, because I come from the perspective, which I'm sure many of you do, that therapy is not associated with cost for care. It's something that we provide through the service we work in. And I came across lots of situations where the families of the children were not getting funding. This was due to various reasons. One of them was dependent on their residency in the country. If they weren't a full resident in the country, they didn't have the ability to apply for funding. And also they felt they were being discriminated if they had a child that had special needs, to not get residency in the country. So again, we couldn't provide the care that or the therapy that the child needed. And this was something that I found quite challenging to accept. From the perspective of a cost for going on an international placement, it's actually quite high. For me to go to Australia, it cost about £10,000. It was £1,600 for my flight, which I covered. It was £2,500 for my accommodation, which I did get back. And my visa application was £54. And then I had to have insurance, medical insurance, while I was there, and that was a couple of £100, and I didn't get to claim that back. So out of the £10,000 I spent, I only got £2,500 back. So it's quite an expense to go, and cost of living there is very high. So my food costs were much higher than at home. That was something I didn't anticipate, and cost of getting around was quite high. So that's something that if the student isn't getting funding from the university, which I didn't have any external funding, it's quite an expensive thing to do. Another challenge was being away from home, being away from my family for such a long period of time. From arriving in Australia, I was picked up by my educator, so that was lovely. And I had a few days to settle in before starting, but it was quite lonely for the first couple of weeks, because I'd be going to work and then I'd be going home on my own. And of course, the time difference for calling your family was quite challenging, and had to be pre-booked in. So that was quite hard. I found the first 3 weeks quite hard because I was spending all weekends on my own, which I'm not used to doing. And I was doing all the sightseeing things on my own, which again was, a little bit difficult. And I had a bit of a wobble, and Fiona said it was the third week is quite common for people to feel a little bit homesick, and I did, and had a long tearful chat with Fiona. Actually, after that point, things just shifted. I don't really know why, but I started to feel more comfortable in the clinic. I started to feel more comfortable with my colleagues, and started to enjoy the placement. And from then it was an absolutely amazing experience. I got to travel around Australia. I got to meet different OTs from different countries and different cultures that taught me lots of different techniques as an OT, which was an absolutely amazing experience. I got to experience treating people from around the world, which I wouldn't have had here. I would say another benefit for me was the fact that certainly on my placements in the UK, I've gone into an area of practice. So say, for example, I've worked in pain management, and that's the only area that you're in for the entirety of your placement. In Australia, the clinic fortunately was able to offer so many different types of therapy. So you had pediatrics, where you were treating children, a wide range of different medical needs. You also would go into the community and do assessments for people with mental health challenges, with physical challenges. We did functional capacity assessments, assisted technology, mobility assessments. We also did lots of assessments for people that were legally challenging the disability service because they'd had their funding stopped. So they were going through a legal challenge. So it was so varied. It wasn't just a paediatric placement. It was such a varied placement, which I think you don't really get in the UK. So I would say that was a huge benefit. Working in private practice was also another difference, because the way the whole practice area, the way the therapy is delivered is very different from what we have in the UK. you're on such a tight time frame of all the things you have to get through within a therapy session. You get an hour and you have to do 3 assessments, and then you have to calculate the findings of those, the results of those assessments, and relay that to the parents in that short time frame. So for me, time management was a little bit tricky. I found getting through the assessments and in that short time was a bit challenging. There's also lots of more. You have reports that you do continually to give to the families and to send to the NDIS. So I think that is different as well, the amount of work that you have to put into the therapy process. Very different working patterns, very different supervision. Just wonderful to experience it from another perspective. I don't know what else.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And the next slide is your
yes
experience.
All right, yeah. So this was my experience and it was awesome. I feel very, very privileged. I did a skydive. I went traveling to Sydney on my own. I went to Melbourne to see the penguins. I went to see the whales. It was an amazing experience to have the opportunity to go somewhere and work in a different country and then get to travel at the same time. I think is just wonderful. I feel very lucky to be able to do it. And I also feel as a practitioner, I developed as an occupational therapist, I developed my skills, but actually as a person, getting to experience working with people from all over the world was absolutely amazing. It's really taught me so much. I think we talk about, the cultural differences at university, but working with people that have trained as an OT in different countries was very, very rewarding and very, very helpful to me as a practitioner to gain that level of understanding of different cultures within the practice. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Collette. That's really helpful. And obviously, Collette hands in her final assessment, I believe, on Friday, so she's very nearly there. So.
Oh no, I've handed it in. I'm just waiting. Yeah, I'm just waiting till next week for my final grades.
Okay, so she's very nearly there. Right, I'm going to come out of that now. So, are there any questions, or is there anything anybody would like?